Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of the Zephyrian warship Luminous Truth, his 4 eyes scanning the dark space ahead. The deep void between star systems stretched endlessly in all directions. Nothing lived out here. Nothing could survive. In this cold, empty place where even light took years to travel between the nearest stars. "Commander," called out scanner operator Zixmal from her station, "I'm picking up something strange." Veltar's head turned toward her, his neck twisting in a way that would have looked impossible to human eyes. "What kind of strange?" "There's an object out there. It's big, really big, and it's not moving." "Show me." The main screen flickered to life, showing a grainy image of something dark against the stars. It looked like a ship, but the shape was all wrong. Where Zephyrian ships were smooth and curved like flowing water, this thing was angular and rough. It had hard edges and jutting pieces that stuck out in different directions. "Run it through the database," Veltar ordered. "Find out what species built that thing." Zixmal's fingers danced over her controls. The computer systems of the Luminous Truth were some of the most advanced in the galaxy. They held records of every known species and every type of ship ever encountered. If this vessel had been built by anyone the Zephyrians had met before, they would know in seconds, but the seconds turned into minutes. The computer kept searching, comparing the strange ship's design to millions of records. Nothing matched. "Commander," Zixmal said, her voice uncertain, "the database shows no matches. This ship design is completely unknown." Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. In 300 years of space travel, the Zephyrians had cataloged every major species in this part of the galaxy. They had records going back thousands of years. How could there be a ship out here that matched nothing in their vast knowledge? "Distance?" he asked. 12,000 kilometers and closing." "Should I order the fleet to stop?" Veltar looked around. His bridge. The Luminous Truth was the flagship of a small exploration fleet. Besides his own ship, there were 2 smaller vessels, the Starseeker and the Cosmic Wind. All 3 ships were armed. But they were built for exploration, not war. "Signal the other ships," he decided. "Tell them to maintain formation, but keep weapons ready. We're going to take a closer look." As they moved closer to the strange vessel, more details became visible. The ship was huge, easily twice the size of the Luminous Truth. Its hull was dark metal, scarred and dented as if it had been through many battles. Strange symbols were painted along its sides, but they were faded and hard to read. "Life signs?" Veltar asked. "None that I can detect," replied Zixmal. "But the ship is strange. The hull is blocking most of our scans. I can't tell what's inside. Any power readings?" "That's the weird part, Commander. There are energy readings, but they're very faint. Like the ship is mostly shut down, but something is still running." Veltar studied the alien vessel. It hung in space like a dead thing, dark and silent. But something about it made him nervous. The design was not just unknown, it was wrong. Somehow, the way the parts fit together, the angle of the hull, even the color of the metal seemed off. "Commander," came a new voice. It was Captain Morden of the Starseeker. "My science officer says there's something strange about this ship's construction. The metal composition is unlike anything we've seen. And the energy signature is ... unusual. Unusual how? I'm not sure. It's like the ship is generating power in a way that doesn't match any known technology. My science officer wants to get closer to study it." Veltar considered this. His orders were to explore and investigate anything unusual they found. This certainly qualified as unusual, but something deep in his mind was telling him to be careful. "All ships, maintain safe distance," he ordered. "Launch a probe first. Let's see what we're dealing with before we get too close." A small probe shot out from the Luminous Truth, its sensors active and recording everything. As it approached the mysterious ship, the readings became even more puzzling. "Commander," Zixmal said, excitement creeping into her voice, "the probe is detecting some kind of docking bay. It's open to space, but there's an energy field across the opening. And there are symbols near the opening that the computer is starting to translate." "What do they say?" It's taking time, but the computer thinks there's some kind of identification. Marks, ship name, and Commander, I think these symbols spell out something like United Earthship Defiance. Veltar felt his blood freeze. Earth. He knew that name. Every Zephyrian who had studied galactic history knew that name. Earth was the home world of the humans, a species that had appeared in this part of the galaxy. About 400 years ago, the humans had been aggressive and dangerous. They had fought a war with several other species, including the Zephyrians. The war had been brutal and costly. In the end, the humans had been defeated, their fleet destroyed, their people scattered or wiped out, but that had been centuries ago. The humans were gone. Everyone knew that. Are you certain about that translation? Veltar asked. The computer is 97% certain. This is a human ship, Commander. But that's impossible. The humans were destroyed in the contact war 300 years ago. Veltar stared at the screen. The dark ship hung before them, silent and mysterious. If this was really a human vessel, then it was older than most Zephyrian cities. It should have been dead metal floating in space, its crew long since turned to dust. Commander, Zixmo continued, the probe is detecting something else. There are areas inside the ship where the energy readings are stronger, and ... She paused, checking her instruments again. There might be something still active in there. Active? How? I'm not sure. The readings are strange. It's like there's a power source deep inside the ship, but it's not like any power source we know about. The energy patterns are ... wrong, Veltar made his decision. Signal the fleet. We're going to dock with this ship and investigate, but everyone stays alert. If this is really a human vessel, we need to be very careful. The luminous truth moved slowly toward the alien ship. As they got closer, the details became clearer. The hull was covered in scars from weapons fire. Parts of the ship looked like they had been melted and reformed. This vessel had been in a major battle, probably the battle that had ended the contact war. Docking bay is large enough for a shuttle, reported the pilot. But Commander, I'm reading. Some kind of energy field across the opening. It might be dangerous. Can we get through it? Maybe. The field seems weak, like it's been running for a very long time and is starting to fail. Veltar nodded. Prepare a boarding party. Full environmental. Suits, weapons, and scanning equipment were going inside. 20 minutes later, Veltar stood in the shuttle bay of the Luminous Truth, checking his equipment one final time. With him were 5 other Zephyrians, Zixmol, 2 security officers, an engineer, and a science specialist. All of them wore full environmental suits designed to protect them from hostile atmospheres, radiation, and other dangers. Remember, Veltar said as they boarded the shuttle, we have no idea what we're going to find in there. The humans were known for their traps and tricks. Stay alert and don't touch anything unless I give permission. The shuttle launched from the Luminous Truth and approached the docking bay of the human ship. As they passed through the energy field, Veltar felt a strange, tingling sensation, like electricity running over his skin. Field is holding, reported the pilot. We're through. Docking bay has atmosphere, but it's thin. Good thing we're wearing suits. The shuttle settled onto the deck of the alien vessel with a soft thud. Through the windows, Veltar could see the inside of the docking bay. It was huge, easily large enough to hold a dozen shuttles. But it was empty except for some strange equipment attached to the walls. Gravity is present, Zixmo reported. About 80% of Zephyrian normal. Air is breathable but stale. This ship has been running on emergency power for a very long time. They stepped out of the shuttle and onto the deck of the human ship. The metal under their feet was solid, but Veltar could feel vibrations running through it. Something deep in the ship was still working. Which way? Asked one of the security officers. Veltar looked around. There were several passages leading out of the docking bay. Most of them were dark, but one had faint lights glowing along the walls. That way, he decided. Follow the lights, but remember weapons ready. They walked through corridors that seemed designed for creatures smaller than Zephyrians. The humans had been about the same size, Veltar remembered from the historical records. The walls were covered with more of the strange symbols, and occasionally they passed rooms filled with equipment they couldn't identify. "Commander," Zixmal sighed, studying her scanner. "I'm picking up stronger energy readings ahead. Whatever is powering this ship, we're getting closer to it. Any life signs?" "No, but the energy readings are getting very strange. It's like the power source is doing something that doesn't make sense." They continued deeper into the ship. The corridors began to branch and split, forming a maze of passages. But the lights continued to guide them forward, as if the ship wanted them to find something. Finally, they reached a large chamber with a massive door. The door was sealed, but there was a panel next to it covered with buttons and displays. The displays showed symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they were moving when no one was watching. "Can you open it?" Veltar asked the engineer. "Maybe, but Commander, the energy readings beyond this door are incredible. Whatever is in there, it's putting out more power than our entire ship." Veltar stared at the door. Every instinct was telling him to turn around and leave this place. But his duty was to explore and investigate. The Zephyrian people needed to know what was out here. "Open it," he ordered. The engineer worked at the panel for several minutes. Finally, there was a deep rumble, and the massive door began to slide open. Beyond it was a chamber filled with a blue-white light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "By the void," whispered Zixmal. "Commander, you need to see this." Veltar stepped forward and looked into the chamber. What he saw there made no sense. In the center of the room was a sphere of pure energy, contained within a framework of metal and crystal. The sphere was beautiful and terrible, like a tiny star held in a cage. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that the energy was flowing the wrong way. Instead of consuming fuel to create power, this device seemed to be creating energy from nothing. It was generating more power than it consumed. "That's impossible," breathed the science specialist. "The laws of physics don't allow for that kind of reaction." "And yet there it is," Veltar replied. "A human ship with a power source that shouldn't exist." As they stood staring at the impossible engine, none of them noticed the displays around the chamber beginning to glow brighter. None of them saw the symbols on the walls starting to move and change. And none of them realized that their discovery had awakened something that had been sleeping for 300 years. The blue-white sphere pulsed in front of them like a living heart. Veltar could not look away from it. The energy it gave off made his skin tingle even through his protective suit. Every few seconds, waves of power rolled out from the sphere, making the air shimmer. "Get readings on everything," Veltar ordered his team. "I want to know exactly what we're looking at." Zixmal held up her scanner and pointed it at the energy sphere. The device immediately began making warning sounds. She looked at the display and her face went pale. "Commander, this is impossible. The scanner says this device is creating energy from nothing. But that violates the basic laws of the universe. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only changed from one form to another." The science specialist, a thin Zephyrian named Kethmos, pulled out his own equipment. His scanners were more advanced, designed to study unknown phenomena. He pointed them at the sphere and waited for the readings. "By the void," he whispered. "Zixmal is right. This thing is generating power, but not from any fuel source I can detect. It's like it's pulling energy from empty space itself." "Veltar, watch the sphere pulse. Could our equipment be wrong?" "I don't think so, Commander. I'm running diagnostics on all our instruments. They're working perfectly. What we're seeing here is real, but it shouldn't be possible." The engineer, Tokavar, was studying the framework that held the energy sphere. The metal and crystal structure was covered in symbols and patterns that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. "Commander, look at this containment system. The materials are unlike anything in our databases. This crystal formation should not be able to hold that much energy. By our calculations, it should have melted centuries ago." Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. "How much energy are we talking about?" Kethmos checked his readings again. "More than our entire fleet produces. More than most space stations. This single device could power a small city, For how long? That's the thing, Commander. Based on these readings, it could run forever. The energy output is constant, and there's no sign of any fuel being consumed. One of the security officers, Draketon, pointed his weapon scanner at the sphere. Commander, I'm detecting some kind of field around that thing. It's not just generating power, it's also creating some kind of space distortion. What kind of distortion? I'm not sure. It's like the space around the sphere is bent somehow, twisted. My instruments can't make sense of it. Veltar ordered his team to spread out and examine the rest of the chamber. The room was large with multiple levels, connected by ramps and platforms. Equipment covered every surface, most of it dark and inactive. But some displays were still glowing, showing symbols and numbers that changed constantly. Kethmos, can you read any of these displays? The science specialist approached one of the glowing panels. The symbols are human writing, but the translation program is having trouble. These aren't normal words. They look like mathematical formulas, but the mathematics don't make sense. How so? They're using equations that assume the laws of physics work differently than they actually do. Like someone wrote mathematics for a universe where entropy runs backward, Zixmol called out from across the chamber. Commander, I found something over here. It looks like a control station. Veltar walked over to where she stood. Before them was a chair sized for a human, surrounded by control panels and displays. The chair was positioned so that whoever sat in it would have a clear view of the energy sphere. Someone spent a lot of time sitting here, Veltar observed. Look at the wear patterns on the chair and the controls. Tukavar examined the control panels. These systems are still active, Commander. Whoever was operating this equipment left. It running. Can you tell what it does? Some of it, yes. These controls seem to monitor the energy sphere. These others... Tukavar paused, studying the displays more carefully. I think these might control the containment system. And these over here are completely unknown. Kethmos joined them at the control station. Commander, I'm picking up some kind of data storage device connected to this station. It might contain information about how this system works. Can you access it? Maybe, but I'll need time to figure out the human interface. While Kethmos worked on the data storage device, Veltar continued to study the chamber. Everything about this place felt wrong. The humans had built something here that challenged everything the Zephyrians knew about science and physics. Commander, Draketon called out, I found something else. There's another chamber beyond this one. Veltar followed the security officer to a passage at the back of the room. Beyond it was a smaller chamber filled with more equipment. But this equipment was different. Where the energy chamber felt alien and wrong, this room felt more familiar. These look like stasis pods, Draketon said, pointing to several large cylindrical containers arranged along the walls. Veltar counted 12 pods in total. Each one was connected to the ship's power system by thick cables. Status lights on each pod glowed softly, indicating they were still active. Are they occupied? He asked. Draketon checked his scanner. Yes, Commander. There are life forms in these pods. Weak life signs, but definitely alive. Humans? I believe so. The readings match what we know about human biology. Veltar stared at the stasis pods. Humans who have been asleep for 300 years. It appears so, Commander. But that should be impossible. No stasis technology can keep someone alive for that long. Today we've seen a lot of things that should be impossible. Zixmol's voice came through their communicators. Commander, you need to come back here. Kethmos found something in the data storage device. They returned to the control station where Kethmos was staring at a display screen. His face was pale and his hands were shaking slightly. What did you find? Veltar asked. Ship's logs, Commander. Records of what happened here. And, Commander, if these records are accurate, everything we thought we knew about the contact war is wrong. Show me. Kethmos activated the display. Human text appeared on the screen, but the translation program converted it to Zephyrian script as they watched. This is the final log entry of Captain Sarah Chun, commanding officer of the UES Defiance. According To this, their ship wasn't destroyed in the final battle of the Contact War. They were given a special mission. What kind of mission? To protect something. They were ordered to take this experimental engine and guard it. The log says the engine was given to them by ... something else. Something else? The records aren't clear, Commander. But it sounds like the humans made contact with another species. Something that gave them this impossible technology. Veltar felt his blood turn cold. What else do the logs say? Kethmos scrolled through more entries. Captain Chin writes about receiving the engine from entities she calls the Builders. She says the Builders warned them that the engine must never be shut down. If it stops working, something terrible will happen. What kind of terrible? The logs don't say exactly. But Captain Chun writes about keeping the door closed and holding back the tide. She talks about their duty to protect not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Draketon leaned closer to the display. Commander, look at the dates on these logs. The last entry was made just before the ship went into its current state. Captain Chien ordered the crew into stasis pods and set the ship to drift in deep space. Why? According to this, their orders were to stay hidden and keep the engine running no matter what, even if it meant never going home. Veltar studied the logs. Nothing made sense. The humans had been at war with half the galaxy. Why would they be trusted with protecting anything? Kethmos, are there any technical details about how the engine works? Some, Commander, but most of it is beyond my understanding. The logs mention something called inverse entropy manipulation and quantum vacuum extraction. These are concepts I've never heard of. What about the Builders? Any description of them? Very little. Captain Chin writes that they exist outside normal space-time and that they gave humanity this technology because humans were the only species willing to make the necessary sacrifice. What sacrifice? To guard the engine forever, even if it meant being forgotten by history. Suddenly, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. The displays around them flashed red warning symbols, and the energy sphere began pulsing faster. What's happening? Veltar demanded. Zixmal checked her scanner. Commander, the engine is destabilizing. The energy output is increasing rapidly. Is it going to explode? I don't know. But the containment field is fluctuating. If it fails, the chamber filled with a low humming sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The air began to shimmer, and Veltar felt a strange pressure in his head. Commander, Kethmos said, his voice tight with fear. The logs mention something about this. If the engine is disturbed, it can become unstable. We might have triggered some kind of security system. How do we stop it? I don't know. The logs say only the crew can operate the engine safely. Veltar looked toward the passage that led to the stasis chamber. Then we wake them up. Commander, that could be dangerous. We don't know what 300 years in stasis has done to them. And we don't know what will happen if that engine explodes. We need answers, and the only people who have them are sleeping in those pods. The humming sound grew louder, and the energy sphere began to pulse so rapidly that it was almost blinding. Around them, equipment that had been dark for centuries suddenly came to life. All right, Veltar decided. We're going to wake up the humans. But everyone stay alert. We have no idea how they'll react to finding aliens aboard their ship. As they moved toward the stasis chamber, none of them noticed the symbols on the walls beginning to glow brighter. None of them saw the equations on the displays starting to change, shifting into new patterns that described physics no Zephian had ever imagined. And none of them realized that somewhere in the deep structure of space-time itself, something ancient and patient had noticed their presence and was slowly beginning to wake up. The engine pulsed faster, its blue-white light growing brighter with each beat. Whatever the humans had been guarding for 3 centuries was about to be disturbed. And in the darkness between the stars, something that had been waiting for a very long time began to stir. The stasis chamber filled with flashing red lights as the alarms continued to sound. Veltar stood before the 12 pods, trying to decide which one to open first. The energy readings from the main chamber were getting worse by the minute. Commander, Zixmal called out, "The engine destabilization is spreading throughout the ship. We need to do something quickly." "Which pod contains the captain?" Veltar asked. Kethmos checked the labels on each container. The human writing was faded but still readable. "This one, Commander. Pod 7, Captain Sarah Chun." "Can you wake her up safely?" "I think so. The stasis system appears to be automated. There's a revival sequence programmed into the pod's computer." "Do it." Kethmos found the activation panel on the side of the pod. The controls were simpler than he had expected. He pressed a series of buttons, and the pod began to hum softly. Lights along its surface changed from red to amber to green. "Revival sequence initiated," he reported. "It will take several minutes for the occupant to wake up fully." They waited anxiously as the pod went through its cycle. Steam began to vent from small openings, and the temperature inside started to rise. Through the transparent window they could see a human female lying motionless. Suddenly, the woman's eyes opened. She gasped and coughed, her body jerking as consciousness returned. The pod's lid slid open with a soft hiss. Captain Sarah Chun sat up slowly, blinking in the red emergency lighting. She was smaller than the Zephyrians, with pale skin and dark hair. Her movements were stiff and uncertain after 3 centuries of sleep, her eyes focused on Veltar and his team. For a moment she stared at them in confusion. Then understanding dawned on her face, followed quickly by alarm. "Who are you?" "She demanded, her voice hoarse. "How did you get aboard my ship?" "I am Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian fleet," he replied carefully. "We found your vessel drifting in space and came aboard to investigate." Sarah Chun tried to stand, but her legs were too weak. She gripped the sides of the pod for support. "How long? How long have I been asleep?" "According to our records, your ship disappeared 300 years ago during the Contact War." Her face went pale. 300 years. She looked around the chamber, seeing her sleeping crew members. "The war. Is it over?" "Yes, Captain. The war ended long ago." "Who won?" Veltar hesitated. "The humans were defeated." "Your people were scattered or destroyed?" Sarah Chun closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was sadness there, but also determination. "Then we're the last ones. The last humans who know the truth." "What truth?" Before she could answer, another alarm began sounding. This one was different, more urgent. Sarah Chun's head snapped up and fear crossed her face. "The containment field," she whispered. "It's failing." She tried to stand again and this time managed to stay on her feet. Her movements were unsteady, but she pushed past the Zephyrians and headed for the main chamber. "Captain, wait," Veltar called, following her. "You're in no condition to move." "Around. You don't understand," she said, stumbling down the corridor. "If the engine fails, we're all dead, not just us. Everyone." They reached the main chamber to find the energy sphere pulsing wildly. The blue-white light was so bright it hurt to look at directly. The containment framework was vibrating, and cracks were beginning to appear in the crystal structures. Sarah Chun collapsed into the operator's chair and began working the controls with practiced efficiency. Her fingers flew over the panels, entering commands and adjusting settings. "What are you doing?" Kethmos asked. "Stabilizing the reaction," she replied without looking up. "Your presence here triggered the security systems. The engine thinks it's under attack." "Why would it think that?" "Because it's not just an engine," Sarah Chun said, her hands never stopping their work. "It's a lock. And someone just tried to pick it." Veltar felt a chill. "A lock on what?" Sarah Chun paused in her work and looked up at him. "On a door that should never be opened." The energy sphere's pulsing began to slow as she worked. The alarm stopped sounding and the red lights changed back to the normal blue-white glow of the engine chamber. "There," she said, slumping back in the chair. "That should hold it for now, but we need to talk." "Captain," Veltar said, "we found your logs. They mention entities called the Builders. What are they?" Sarah Chun stood up slowly and walked to the observation window that looked out into space. "The Builders are old. Older than your species. Older than mine. They exist outside normal space and time in dimensions we can't even imagine. Where did they come from? Nobody knows. But they've been watching our galaxy for millions of years. They gave us this engine for one purpose, to keep something locked away. What kind of something? Sarah Chun turned back to face them. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the laws of physics worked backward? If entropy ran in reverse, if cause and effect were switched around? That's impossible, Kethmos said. The universe doesn't work that way. This universe doesn't work that way, Sarah Chun corrected. But there are other universes, other dimensions where the rules are different. And in one of those dimensions, there are things that want to come here. She walked back to the control station and brought up a display showing complex mathematical equations. The builders discovered that there are cracks in reality, places where our dimension touches others. Most of these cracks are tiny and harmless. But some are bigger. How much bigger? Veltar asked. Big enough for things to come through. Things that don't belong in our universe. Things that could destroy everything we know. Zixmal studied the equations on the display. These formulas describe dimensional barriers, among other things. The engine doesn't just generate power. It creates a field that reinforces reality itself. It keeps the cracks sealed, and if the engine fails, the barrier weakens. The cracks get bigger. Eventually something comes through. Draketon pointed his weapon scanner at the energy sphere. Captain, I'm detecting some kind of spatial distortion around your engine. Is that normal? Sarah Chun checked her controls. Yes and no. The engine naturally warps space-time, but the distortion should be stable. If it's fluctuating, that means the barrier is under stress. Stress from what? From something pushing against it from the other side? The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of the engine. Veltar tried to process what he was hearing. According to this human, their entire universe was being protected by a single device hidden on a forgotten ship. Captain, he said finally, why were the humans chosen for this task? Why not a more advanced species? Sarah Chun smiled sadly. Because we were the only ones willing to do it. The builders approached several species over the centuries. They offered this technology to the Altarians, the Centauri Collective, even your own people. The builders contacted the Zephyrians about 1,000 years ago. They explained the situation and offered the engine technology. But every species they approached said the same thing. The cost was too high. What cost? The engine requires constant monitoring. Someone has to stay with it always, ready to make adjustments and repairs. The crew that accepts this mission can never go home. They have to be willing to be forgotten by history. Veltar understood, and only humans were willing to make that sacrifice. We were desperate, Sarah Chun admitted. The war was going badly. Earth was under siege. When the builders offered us a way to protect not just our world but the entire galaxy, we couldn't refuse. But you lost the war anyway. That was part of the plan. We had to disappear. If other species knew about the engine, they might try to use it for their own purposes. Or worse, they might try to destroy it. Kethmos was studying the technical readouts. Captain, how many people know about this? Just it's the crew of this ship. And now what about Earth's government? Your military leaders? They think we died in the final battle. Our mission was so secret that even our own people don't know about it. Tokovar examined the engine's containment system. Captain, how long can this system run? Indefinitely if properly maintained. The engine draws power from quantum fluctuations in empty space. As long as the universe exists, it will keep running. And if it's not properly maintained? Then the barrier fails and things start coming through from the other dimension. What kind of things? Sarah Chun hesitated. The builders called them the Devourers. They're beings of pure entropy, creatures that exist by unmaking everything around them. In their dimension, destruction is creation and chaos is order. Have you ever seen one? No. And I hope I never do. According to the builders, even looking at a devourer can drive someone insane. They're not just alien, they're antithetical to existence itself. Suddenly, alarms began sounding again. But these were different alarms, coming from the ship's main systems rather than the engine chamber. What now? Veltar asked. Sarah Chun checked the status displays. Her face went white. Oh no, the other ships in your fleet? They're trying to scan the engine from outside. Is that dangerous? Very. Their sensors are interfering with the containment field. If they keep scanning, they could cause a cascade failure. Can you contact them? Not from here. The communication systems are on the bridge? Veltar activated his personal communicator. Luminous Truth? This is Commander Veltar. All ships are to cease scanning operations immediately and pull back to minimum safe distance. Acknowledged, Commander, came the reply. But our science officers are detecting some very unusual readings from that vessel. I don't care what they're detecting. Pull back now. That's an order. As the Zephyrian ships moved away, the alarms gradually stopped. Sarah Chun slumped in relief. That was too close, she said. Any more interference and the containment field could have collapsed completely. Captain, Veltar said, you can't maintain this system forever with just one person. Your crew has been asleep for 3 centuries. I know. That's why I need to wake them up. We have to get back to full operational status. And then what? Then we continue our mission. We guard the engine and keep the door locked, just like we've been doing for 300 years. But there must be another way. Some permanent solution. Sarah Chun shook her head. The builders tried everything else first. This is the only way that works? As long as intelligent life exists in this galaxy, someone has to guard the engine. Veltar looked around the chamber. At the impossible technology and the weary human captain. Captain Chun, you said we're the first people to find you in 3 centuries. That's right. What if we helped? What if the Zephyrians shared this burden with you? Sarah Chun stared at him in surprise. You would do that? Knowing it means some of your people would have to stay here forever? If what you're telling us is true, then this is the most important duty in the galaxy. The Zephyrians would be honored to help. For the first time since waking up, Sarah Chun smiled. Commander, I think this might be the beginning of a very important partnership. But as they spoke, none of them noticed the subtle changes happening around them. The symbols on the walls were glowing brighter, and the equations on the displays were shifting into new patterns deep in the structure of reality itself. Something vast and patient had taken notice of the conversation. The barrier was still holding, but cracks were beginning to form. And in the darkness beyond those cracks, ancient intelligences were starting to probe for weaknesses. Captain Sarah Chun led them back to the stasis chamber, moving more steadily now that her body was recovering from the long sleep. She stopped at the first pod and checked its status display. This is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Torres, my second. In command, she said. We'll need him awake to help explain everything. She activated the revival sequence, and within minutes another human was sitting up in his pod. Torres was a large man with dark skin and graying hair. Like Sarah Chun, he looked around in confusion before his eyes focused on the alien standing nearby. Captain? He said, his voice rough from sleep. Are those double quo Zephyrians, Marcus? They found us. Torres tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him yet. How long? 300 years? The war is over. Humanity lost. Torres closed his eyes and let out a long breath. Then we really are the last ones who know. Not anymore, Sarah Chun sighed, gesturing toward Veltar. Commander Veltar and his people have learned about our mission, and they want to help. Torres looked at the Zephyrian commander with surprise. Help? Why would they want to help? Because if we fail, everyone dies, Veltar replied simply. Over the next hour, they woke up 3 more crew members, Chief Engineer Lisa Park, Science Officer Dr. James Wright, and Communications Specialist Maria Santos. Each awakening followed. The same pattern of confusion, realization, and grim acceptance of their situation. Dr. Wright was the first to ask the question they were all thinking. Captain, how stable is the engine after 3 centuries? Have there been any changes? The containment field is holding, but it's showing stress fractures, Sarah Chun replied. And the quantum resonance patterns have shifted slightly. That's not good, Dr. Wright said, moving to a control panel and checking the readings. If the resonance patterns are changing, it means something is putting pressure on the barrier from the other side. How much pressure? Veltar asked. Chief Engineer Park joined Dr. Wright at the controls. More than we've ever seen before. Look at these energy readings. The Devourers are definitely testing the barrier. Is it still strong enough to hold them back? For now, Park said. But if the pressure keeps increasing, we're going to have problems. Kethmos studied the technical displays. What exactly are the Devourers trying to do? Dr. Wright pulled up a three-dimensional image showing the dimensional barrier. It looked like a soap bubble, constantly shifting and rippling. Dark spots appeared and disappeared across its surface. They're looking for weak points, he explained. Places where they can punch through into our dimension. Each time they test the barrier, it gets a little weaker. How long do we have? Hard to say. Could be years, could be days. It depends on how much effort they're putting into breaking through. Sarah Chun studied the display. The timing isn't a coincidence. They started testing the barrier right after Commander Veltar's ships arrived. Something about your presence here has attracted their attention. How is that possible? Zixmal asked. The engine creates ripples in space-time, Dr. Wright explained. Normally these ripples are too small to notice. But when you scanned our ship, your sensors amplified the effect. It was like ringing a bell in a quiet room. And the Devourers heard it, they felt it. And now they know exactly where we are. The chamber fell silent as everyone processed this information. The arrival of the Zephyrian fleet had not only discovered the secret mission, it had also made it more dangerous. There has to be something we can do, Veltar said. Some way to strengthen the barrier or hide it better. There is, Sarah Chun said quietly. But you're not going to like it. Tell me. The engine works by using consciousness as a focusing element. The more minds connected to it, the stronger the barrier becomes. That's why we need a crew. The engine can run automatically, but it needs living beings to reach its full potential. How many minds? Right now we have 6 humans active. That's enough for basic operations. But to really strengthen the barrier, to make it strong enough to withstand what's coming, we'd need at least 20 conscious beings connected to the system. Veltar understood immediately. You want some of my people to link with your engine. It's the only way. And once they're connected, they can't leave. The link has to be maintained constantly, or the barrier will weaken again. Lieutenant. Commander Torres stood up, his strength finally returning. Commander, you need to understand what you'd be asking your people to do. When you connect to the engine, you become part of it. Your consciousness merges with the quantum field that maintains the barrier. What does that mean exactly? It means giving up your individual existence, Dr. Wright said. Your mind becomes part of a larger collective consciousness. You remain aware, but you're no longer entirely yourself. And there's no way to reverse the process, none that we know of. The builders warned us that the connection is permanent. Draketon stepped forward. Commander, this is too much to ask. We came here to explore, not to sacrifice our lives. I understand your concern, Sarah Chun said. But you need to know what we're really facing here. She activated another display, this one showing a map of their local region of the galaxy. Red dots appeared scattered across the star systems. These are dimensional weak points, she explained. Places where the barrier between universes is naturally thin. If our engine fails, the Devourers will come through at every one of these locations simultaneously. Veltar counted the red dots. There. Well, hundreds of them, spread across dozens of star systems. All of these at once? That's how they operate. They don't invade one planet at a time. They emerge everywhere at once, like a plague spreading through reality itself. What happens to the planets they reach? They cease to exist, Dr. Wright sighed grimly. The Devourers don't conquer or destroy in any way we understand. They unmake things. They cause matter and energy to simply stop existing. Chief Engineer Park brought up more technical data. According to the builder's calculations, if the Devourers break through in this region, They could unmake half the galaxy within a few years. And our only defense is this one engine? The only one in this part of the galaxy, Sarah-Chun confirmed. The builders placed similar engines in other regions, but they're too far away to help us here. Veltar looked around at his team. They were all staring at the displays, trying to comprehend the scale of what they were facing. How many other species know about this? He asked. None. The builders made it clear that knowledge of the engines had to be kept secret. If word got out, there would be wars fought over control of the technology. Or species might try to destroy the engines, Torres added. Some civilizations would rather take their chances with the devourers than trust another species to protect them. Communications specialist Santos activated her equipment and began monitoring local space. Captain, I'm picking up increased quantum fluctuations throughout this sector. The devourers aren't just testing our barrier anymore. They're actively trying to break through. How long do we have? At this rate of deterioration, maybe 6 hours before the first breach. Sarah-Chun turned to Veltar. Commander, I know this is an impossible choice, but we need your help now. Without additional minds connected to the engine, the barrier will fail. If I order my people to link with your engine, what exactly will happen to them? Dr. Wright consulted his readings. The process takes about 30 minutes. During that time, their consciousness gradually merges with the quantum field. They'll remain aware of their surroundings, but their primary focus will be on maintaining the barrier. Will they still be able to communicate? Yes, but not in the way you're used to. They'll be able to share thoughts and feelings directly with the other connected minds. Verbal communication becomes less important. And they'll live forever? As long as the engine continues to function, yes. Their consciousness becomes part of the system that maintains reality itself. Veltar walked to the observation window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, his other ships were waiting for orders. His crew trusted him to make the right decisions. But how could he ask anyone to make such a sacrifice? Commander, Zixmo said quietly, if what they're telling us is true, then we don't really have a choice. I know, he replied. But that doesn't make it easier. Kethmos joined them at the window. Commander, I volunteer to be connected to the engine. Kethmos ... I'm a scientist. Understanding how the universe works has been my life's purpose. What could be more important than helping to preserve the universe itself? I volunteer too, Zixmal said. If this is really the most important duty in the galaxy, then I want to be part of it. One by one, the other members of Veltar's team stepped forward. Even Drakton, who had objected to the idea, finally nodded his agreement. All right, Veltar said. But I'm not asking anyone else to make this choice. We 6 will link with the engine. That should give you enough minds to strengthen the barrier. Commander, Sarah-Chun said, you don't understand. Once you're connected, you'll be able to see things that we can't. You'll understand why this mission is so important. And you'll know that we couldn't have asked for better partners. Dr. Wright began preparing the connection equipment. The process is painless, but it can be overwhelming at first. You'll suddenly become aware of dimensions and realities that you never knew existed. Will we still be ourselves? You'll be more than yourselves, Torres said. You'll be part of something larger and more important than any individual consciousness. As they prepared for the connection procedure, alarms began sounding again. But this time they weren't coming from the engine chamber. They were coming from space itself. What's happening? Veltar demanded. Santos checked her instruments. Commander, there's a massive distortion forming near your ships. Something is trying to break through the barrier. On the display screens, they could see the space around the Zephyrian fleet beginning to twist and warp. Reality itself was bending, creating a spiral of darkness that hurt to look at. It's starting, Sarah-Chun said grimly. The Devourers have found a weak point. If they break through there, they'll be inside our defensive perimeter. How long do we have? Minutes, maybe less. Dr. Wright activated the connection apparatus. We need to link everyone to the engine now, before it's too late. Veltar looked at his team one last time. Are you all ready? They nodded, understanding that this moment would change them forever. "Then let's save the galaxy," he said. As they approached the connection devices, the space around the Zephyrian fleet continued to twist and darken. Something vast and terrible was pushing against the barrier between dimensions, trying to force its way into their universe. The fate of everything they had ever known now depended on their willingness to sacrifice their individual existence for the greater good, and somewhere, in the darkness beyond reality, ancient intelligences watched and waited for the barrier to fail. The connection chamber filled with a strange blue light as Dr. Wright activated the linking apparatus. 6 metallic headsets hung from cables connected to the main engine, each one glowing with the same energy that pulsed through the dimensional barrier. "The process is simple," Dr. Wright explained as he helped each volunteer into position. "Put on the headset and the quantum field will do the rest. Your consciousness will gradually merge with the engine's control matrix." Veltar picked up the first headset. It was warm to the touch and seemed to vibrate with its own internal energy. "Will we be able to communicate with each other during the process?" "Better than that," Sarah Chun said. "Once you're connected, you'll share a collective awareness. You'll know what each other is thinking and feeling without having to speak." "What about our bodies?" "They'll be sustained by the engine's energy field. You won't need food, water, or even air. The quantum matrix will maintain your physical forms indefinitely." Through the chamber's speakers, Santos's voice crackled with static. "Captain, the distortion near the Zephyrian fleet is expanding. I'm reading massive quantum fluctuations throughout local space. How much time do we have?" Sarah Chun asked. "The barrier is holding, but barely. Maybe 10 minutes before the first." "Breach." Veltar looked at his team. Zixmol was already putting on her headset, her face calm and determined. Kethmos was studying his device with scientific curiosity. Even Draketon, who had been most reluctant, was preparing himself for the connection. "Are you all ready?" Veltar asked. "Ready, Commander," they replied in unison. "Then let's do this." Veltar placed the headset on his skull. Immediately he felt a tingling sensation, like electricity running through his brain. The feeling grew stronger, spreading through his entire nervous system. Around him, his team was going through the same process. He could see their faces changing, becoming peaceful and distant as their consciousness began to merge with the quantum field. Suddenly, Veltar's vision exploded with new awareness. He could see not just the chamber around him, but layers of reality he had never imagined. Dimensions folded on top of each other like sheets of paper, each one containing its own version of space and time. And he could feel the others. Zixmol scientific curiosity, Kethmos wonder at the mathematical beauty of the quantum structures, Draketon fierce determination to protect what he loved. Their thoughts and emotions flowed together, creating a single, unified awareness, but there were more minds in the collective than just the 6 Zephyrians. He could sense the human crew members who had been connected to the engine for centuries, their consciousness weathered but unbroken by their long vigil. And beyond them something vast and ancient that felt like the voice of the universe itself. "Welcome," came a thought that belonged to all of them and none of them. "Welcome to the guardianship." Through their new awareness, Veltar could see the true scope of what they were protecting. The dimensional barrier stretched across hundreds of light years, a gossamer-thin wall between their universe and the realm of the Devourers. It was beautiful and terrifying, like a soap bubble holding back an ocean of chaos. And pressing against that barrier were things that hurt to perceive directly. The Devourers were not creatures in any sense that normal minds could understand. They were concepts made manifest, ideas of destruction and entropy given form and will. They existed to unmake, to cause things to simply cease being. "Can you see them?" Sarah Chun's thoughts joined the collective awareness. "Can you understand what we've been holding back?" Veltar could see them, and the sight filled him with a mixture of terror and determination. The Devourers were pressing against weak points in the barrier, testing it, looking for ways through. Their very presence caused reality to fray at the edges, but now, with the additional minds connected to the engine, the barrier began to strengthen. The quantum field that maintained it grew brighter and more stable. The weak points started to heal, and the pressure from the other dimension began to ease. It's working, Dr. Wright's thoughts came through the link. The barrier is stabilizing. Through the collective awareness, they could sense the space around the Zephyrian fleet. The dark spiral that had been forming was beginning to collapse. As the dimensional barrier reasserted itself, reality snapped back into its proper shape like a rubber band returning to normal, but even as they celebrated this small victory, new alarms began to sound. These came from sensors placed throughout the local star systems, monitoring other weak points in the dimensional barrier. Something's wrong, Santos reported. Her consciousness now part of the collective but still focused on her communication. Duties. I'm detecting massive disturbances at 17 different locations. The Devourers aren't just testing one weak point anymore. They're attacking the entire sector. Through their expanded awareness, the collective could sense what was happening. The Devourers had realized that their primary target was now too well defended. So they were shifting their attention to other weak points, places where the barrier was naturally thin but unguarded. They're trying to outflank us, Torres's thoughts carried grim understanding. If they can break through anywhere in this sector, they'll be able to attack our position from behind. Can we extend our protection to cover those areas? Veltar asked. Not directly, Saratron replied. The engine's field has a limited range. But there might be another way. She shared her knowledge through the collective link. The engine didn't just generate a protective field around their location. It also created resonance patterns that could be transmitted to other points in space, strengthening the barrier at those locations. It's like tuning forks, Dr. Wright explained. If we can create the right frequency patterns, we can cause other weak points to vibrate in harmony with our engine. That would strengthen the barrier across the entire sector. What do we need to do? Focus our collective consciousness on each weak point in turn. Use our combined mental energy to send stabilizing resonances to those locations. It sounded simple, but Veltar quickly realized how difficult it would be. Through the collective awareness, he could sense all 17 weak points simultaneously. Each one required constant attention to keep it stable. It would be like trying to balance 17 spinning plates while riding a bicycle. We can do this, Zixmal's thoughts carried confidence. We have 12 minds connected to the engine now. If we work together, we can cover all the weak points. But it will mean permanent vigilance, Sarah Chun warned. Once we start this process, we can never stop. If our attention wavers for even a moment, the Devourers could break through. Then we won't let our attention waver, Draketon replied. With fierce determination, the collective consciousness began to organize itself. Each mind took responsibility for monitoring specific weak points, while the overall awareness coordinated their efforts. It was like a complex dance with thoughts and intentions flowing between the connected minds in perfect harmony. Veltar found himself responsible for 3 weak points in the Altair system. Through the quantum link, he could feel the stress on the dimensional barrier at those locations. The Devourers were pressing hard, trying to force their way through. But as he focused his attention on the weak points, sending stabilizing energy through the resonance field, the pressure began to ease around him. The other minds were doing the same thing. 12 points of focused consciousness, each one holding back the forces of chaos and destruction. Together, they created a network of protection that covered the entire sector. It's working, Santos reported. The disturbances are stabilizing. The Devourers are being forced back. But victory came with a price. Veltar could feel the strain on the collective consciousness. Maintaining the resonance field across such a wide area required enormous mental effort. They would have to sustain this level of concentration forever. Is this what you've been doing for 300 years? Veltar asked the human crew members through the link. Yes, Sarah Chun replied, but it's easier now. With 12 minds instead of 6, we can share the burden. The responsibility that once fell on each of us alone is now distributed among the entire collective. And we're not alone anymore, Torres added. For centuries, we thought we were the only ones who knew about this threat. Now we have partners, friends, the burden is still heavy, but it's shared. Through the collective awareness, Veltar could sense something else, gratitude. Not just from the human crew, but from something much larger. It was as if the universe itself was thanking them for their sacrifice. The builders are pleased, Dr. Wright explained. They can sense what we've accomplished here. The alliance between humans and Zephyrians, the expansion of the protective network, the strengthening of the dimensional barrier, this is what they hoped would happen eventually. Are they still out there, the builders? Yes, but they exist. On a different level of reality. They can observe and guide, but they cannot directly intervene. That's why they needed species like ours to carry out this mission. As the hours passed, the collective consciousness settled into its new rhythm. The 17 weak points remained stable, the resonance field held strong, and the devourers were forced to retreat to their own dimension, but more importantly, the humans were no longer alone in their vigil. The alliance between their species and the Zephyrians had created something greater than either could achieve separately. Commander, Zixmal's thoughts reached out to Veltar through the link. Do you regret your decision? Veltar considered the question. He was no longer entirely himself. His individual consciousness had become part of something larger, connected to 11 other minds in ways he had never imagined possible. His body would never age, never die, but it would also never leave the ship, yet through the collective awareness he could sense the hundreds of star systems they were protecting. Billions of lives going about their daily existence, completely unaware of the cosmic horror being held at bay. Children playing, artists creating, scientists discovering, lovers meeting for the first time, all of it possible because 12 minds were willing to sacrifice their individual existence for the greater good. No, he replied. I don't regret it. This is the most important thing anyone could ever do. And we're not just protecting our own species, Kethmos added. We're protecting everyone. Every form of life in this part of the galaxy. Through the ship's external sensors, they could see the stars shining peacefully in the darkness. Normal space, where the laws of physics worked the way they were supposed to, where entropy flowed in the right direction, where existence was possible. It was a small thing, really. A few minds connected to an impossible engine, holding a door closed against forces that wanted to unmake everything. But sometimes small things were the most important things of all. And in the collective consciousness of 12 beings who had chosen duty over self-interest, the universe had found its perfect guardians. The vigil would continue. The door would remain locked. And in the space between dimensions, the devourers would wait in frustrated hunger, held back by the combined will of humans and Zephyrians who had learned that some sacrifices were worth making. Forever.